The soup had barely arrived when my sister lifted her glass and said to the whole table, "To Claire, our forever renter." Everyone laughed, the soft, harmless laugh that families use when the joke is only a little cruel. My mother patted my hand. My uncle said something about how smart it was, really, not to tie yourself down. I smiled, the way you smile when the smile is the only armor you have left, and I said thank you, and I meant none of it. What none of them knew, what I did not yet know myself, was that the money I had saved for 7 years, the deposit for the small house I was about to buy, was already gone. It had been gone for weeks, and somewhere in the city, a woman named Ruth Alvarez was about to pick up a phone. Let me take you back, because you cannot understand the size of the wound without understanding the size of the saving. I am 34 years old. I work in the billing department of a hospital, which means I spend my days on the phone with people, on the worst day of their lives, explaining numbers they cannot pay. It is not glamorous work. But it is steady, and I am good at it. And for 7 years, I treated my own money the way I wished the hospital would treat those frightened callers. Carefully, honestly, one line at a time. I wanted a house, not a big house. A small one, with a door that was mine and a kitchen window that faced east, so the morning would find me before anyone else could. Saving that deposit was not a story of one big sacrifice. It was 1,000 small ones. I took the early shift because it paid a little more. I tutored 2 nights a week, helping nursing students pass their coding exams. $40 an hour that I never once spent on myself. I drove a car with a cracked side mirror I fixed with tape because a new mirror was 2 shifts of tutoring. I brought lunch from home in the same scratched container for so long that my coworker Denise started calling it the house box because she said every sad little sandwich in there was another brick. She was joking. She was also right. That box carried a house inside it, one lunch at a time. The account where I kept the money is where this whole thing goes wrong, so I have to tell you about it plainly. 8 years ago, my father got sick. It was fast, and it was frightening, and for a few months, our family did what families do in a crisis. We pooled together. My sister Danielle and I opened a joint savings account so we could both move money quickly for his care. Pharmacy, the medical supply place, the cab fares to the hospital when neither of us could drive. It was practical. It was born of love. When Dad recovered, we should have closed it. But closing an account is one of those small chores that never feels urgent. And so it stayed open, both our names still on it, quietly, for years. I did not use that account for my house savings on purpose. It just happened the way things happen. It was the account my tutoring payments went into, because that was the number I had memorized. Every month, I moved my extra shifts and my $40 nights into it, and every month, the balance climbed. And I stopped thinking of it as the family account at all. In my mind, it had become mine. The house account, the future. I even changed the nickname in my banking app to Kitchen Window. I never imagined my sister still saw it. I never imagined she was watching the number climb the same way I was, with a completely different plan. Danielle is 2 years younger than me and has always lived at a different altitude. Where I count, Danielle wants. She is warm and funny and impossible to stay angry at, which is a dangerous set of gifts in a person who does not think tomorrow is real. When we were girls, she borrowed my things and returned them broken. And always with such a sweet apology that I ended up comforting her about my own broken things. Our mother adored that quality in her. "Danielle lives," Mom would say, as if the rest of us were only rehearsing. I loved my sister. I want you to know that because what she did makes more sense when you understand that I never once thought I needed to protect myself from her. The first small clue arrived at a family lunch in the spring, though I did not recognize it as a clue. Danielle had just gotten engaged to a man named Marcus, a quiet accountant with kind eyes and a nervous laugh, and she was glowing about the wedding. Then she mentioned, almost carelessly, that they had upgraded their honeymoon. Not the little coastal cabin they had talked about for months. Now it was 2 weeks at an overwater resort in the Maldives, the kind you daydream about. A place with a private plunge pool and a name I could not pronounce. How wonderful, my mother breathed. I remember thinking, mildly, that accountants must do better than I assumed. I remember Marcus looking at his plate. I should have paid attention to Marcus looking at his plate. He was a numbers man, marrying into a family of feelings. And numbers men get quiet when the numbers do not add up. But I was busy that spring. The busiest. Most hopeful spring of my life. Because I had finally crossed the line I had been walking toward for 7 years. My deposit had reached the amount I needed. I had run the calculation on my lunch break, in the break room, with the house box open in front of me. And I had actually put my hand over my mouth so Denise would not see me cry. Enough. After 7 years, I had enough. That night, I did not celebrate. I just sat in my rented apartment and looked at the number and let myself believe it. I found the house 3 weeks later. It was small and a little tired, the paint tired, the fence tired. But the kitchen window faced east, exactly east. And when the agent opened the back door, the morning light came in across the floor like it had been waiting for me. I put in an offer that afternoon. It was accepted 2 days later. I called my mother first, because that is what you do. And she said, "Oh, Claire, that's nice," in the same voice she used for weather. And then she told me about a dress Danielle had tried on. I got off the phone and told myself it did not matter. The house did not need her excitement. The house only needed my deposit, and my deposit was ready. That is when I met Ruth Alvarez, though only by phone and email at first. She was the escrow officer handling my purchase, a brisk, warm woman who had clearly guided 1,000 nervous first-time buyers through this exact fear. Escrow, she explained, is the safe middle. My deposit would go into a neutral account she controlled, held there, protected, until every condition was met, and the house legally became mine. "Think of me as the referee," she said. "Nobody's money moves unless the rules are followed." I loved that. After a lifetime of watching money move in my family for reasons that were never quite fair, the idea of a referee who followed rules made me want to weep with relief. The second clue came at Danielle's bridal shower, which I hosted. Because, of course, I hosted. I made the little sandwiches, I bought the flowers. And as I refilled the lemonade, I overheard my aunt ask Danielle how she and Marcus were affording all this, meaning the resort, the designer shoes, the band they had booked. And Danielle laughed and said, "Oh, we came into a little cushion, a little cushion." I remember the phrase because it was such an odd, soft word, and because my mother, across the room, went suddenly still and then very loudly asked if anyone wanted more cake. At the time, I thought nothing of it. A cushion. Newly engaged people say vague, dreamy things about money. I refilled the lemonade and went back to being the sister who hosts. There was one more clue. and it is the one that still makes my stomach turn, because it was Danielle practically confessing and me not hearing it. A few weeks before, she had texted me out of nowhere. "Hey, did the family account ever glitch on you? Mine's acting weird, showing wrong numbers, LOL." I remember answering from the hospital break. "Room. Haven't looked. That thing's basically dead." And going back to my sandwich. She was not asking about a glitch. She was testing whether I was watching. She was checking, the way a person checks a house is empty before they go in, whether I still looked at the account she was already emptying. And I had told her, without knowing it, that the door was open and the light was off. I have forgiven myself for a great many things in this story, but I am still working on forgiving myself for LOL. The morning I signed the purchase agreement, I did it at the agent's little office on a Tuesday, in a gray plastic chair with a pen that skipped. I initialed 30 pages, my hand cramped by page 20. And on the last line, where you sign your whole name, I stopped because I realized I was about to become a person who owned a door, and I had to breathe before I could make my hand move. The agent, a patient woman named Trina, slid a box of tissues toward me without a word. The way people do when they have watched many first-time buyers cry over a skipping pen. "It's a big thing," she said. "It's supposed to feel like this." I sighed. I drove home with the copy of the agreement on the passenger seat like a person, buckled in. And I did not once imagine that the money behind all those initials was already sitting in a resort's booking system on the other side of the world. I want to be honest about my own blindness here, because I think it matters. There were signs, and I walked past every one of them, because seeing them would have required me to imagine that my sister could reach into my future and take it, and I could not imagine that. I had spent 7 years learning to distrust the world enough to save, and somehow I had never turned that carefulness toward the people at my own table. That is the particular cruelty of family betrayal. The locks you build face outward. You never think to lock the door between you and the people who share. Your name, because that door is not supposed to have a lock at all. My closing date was set for the end of the month, and Ruth needed my deposit wired into escrow by the 15th. I remember the morning I did it. I logged into the app, I opened Kitchen Window, and I began the transfer to the escrow account. The app asked me to confirm. I confirmed. A little wheel spun. A message appeared saying the transfer was being processed. Please allow 1 to 2 business days. I closed the app, put my phone in my bag, and floated through my entire shift on the hospital phones, gentler than I had ever been. Because for the first time in years, I felt like a person who was also being taken care of, somewhere, by a referee who followed the rules. 2 days later, Ruth emailed to say the funds had not arrived, but that delays happened. Not to worry, please check with my bank. I checked the app. The transfer showed as returned. I frowned at it, the way you frown at a word you have read wrong. Returned? I called the bank on my break, standing by the window in the stairwell where the reception was better. And a polite young man told me the transfer had been returned because there were insufficient funds in the account. I laughed. I actually laughed at him. I told him that was impossible, that there was more than enough, that I had checked the balance that very morning. There was a pause, and then he read me the balance, and the balance was $14.60. I have thought many times about that pause on the stairwell, the one just before my whole understanding of my family rearranged itself. $14.60. 7 years. I asked him to say it again. He said it again. I asked when the money had left, and he said he could see a series of withdrawals over the past several weeks, and then a large final withdrawal, all authorized by an account holder. "There are 2 names on this account," he said. Careful now, hearing something break in my voice. "Are you the only one who uses it?" And I stood in that stairwell, with the bad light and the good reception, and I said very quietly, "No." My sister's name is on it too. I did not confront anyone that day. I want you to understand why, because I think it is the most important choice in this whole story. Every instinct in my body wanted to call Danielle immediately and scream until the phone melted. But 7 years of billing calls had taught me something. When someone owes an enormous amount and you have no proof, the loud call gives them time. It tells them the alarm is ringing so they can hide the body. If I called Danielle in a rage that afternoon, she would cry, and Mom would defend her. And by morning, the story would have softened into a misunderstanding, a loan I had somehow forgotten agreeing to. I did not need to be loud. I needed the paper. So I hung up the phone, and I sat down, and I started building the trail. I asked the bank to send me the full transaction history, printed and stamped, the official kind. I asked Ruth Alvarez, gently, whether Escrow kept a record of my failed transfer. The exact date, the exact returned amount, and she said, of course. That everything in Escrow is documented. That documentation was the entire point of her existence. "That's what protects you," she said, not knowing what she was protecting me from. I made a folder. Not a metaphor, an actual folder. Cardboard, the kind we use at the hospital. And into it, I put the escrow statement, the returned transfer notice, and when it arrived, the bank history, with every withdrawal laid out in a neat, damning column. I also called the bank's fraud line because I wanted to understand exactly what I was and was not entitled to. The woman there was kind but honest with me, and what she told me sharpened everything. A joint account, she explained, is legally shared. Both names have full rights. Danielle had not hacked anything. On paper, she had every right to withdraw from an account with her name on it. But, the woman added, and I could hear her choosing her words, you can document which deposits were yours and where the money went. And that matters a great deal if you ever need to prove it to her, to a mediator, or to anyone else. That was the moment my grief turned into a plan. I could not undo the joint account, but I could prove, deposit by deposit, that the money in it had been mine, earned on my early shifts and my $40 nights. And I could prove, merchant by merchant, exactly which paradise it had bought. The withdrawals told a story more patient and more painful than a single theft. They had started small, months earlier, 200 here, 500 there. Amounts easy to miss if you only ever watched the balance go up and never studied where the individual dollars went. Then they grew. And the largest one, the one that finally scraped the account down to $14, was dated 3 days after Danielle told the family she and Marcus had come into a little cushion. I sat at my kitchen table with the printouts, and I matched the dates to my memory like a detective matching a suspect to a photograph. And the picture that came up was my sister's face at the bridal shower, laughing, saying that soft, ugly word. Cushion. She had been sitting on my house. Then I did the thing that turned a wound into a case. The bank history did not just show money leaving, it showed where it went. The merchant names attached to 2 of the transfers. One was a travel agency. The other was the booking company for a resort, and when I searched The very first result was an overwater villa with a private plunge pool in the Maldives, at a place with a name I could not pronounce. I sat very still. I did not cry, which surprised me. I felt instead a strange, cold clarity, the feeling of a blurry photograph suddenly snapping into focus. My deposit had not vanished into some emergency, some desperate hidden trouble I might have forgiven. My deposit was a plunge pool. My kitchen window was 2 weeks of someone else's paradise. That night, I did not sleep, and I did not rage, and I did not eat. I sat on the floor of my rented living room with the printouts fanned around me like a hand of cards nobody would want to be dealt. And I did the only thing that has ever calmed me. I made a spreadsheet. Dates down the left, amounts in the middle, merchant names on the right. It is a strange thing to grieve with a spreadsheet, but I am a billing person, and numbers are the language I pray in. Somewhere around 2 in the morning, I noticed my own hands were shaking, and I looked at them. My careful little hands that had packed the house box for 7 years, and I thought, without any drama at all, these are the hands that saved it. And she took it with a phone and a thumb. Then I closed the laptop, and I lay down on the floor, and I finally cried. Once. Hard. And then I stopped. Because crying does not build a trail, and I had a trail to build. The next day at work, I told Denise. I did not mean to. It just came out over the house box at lunch, flat and quiet, the way the worst things do. She put down her fork. She did not say, "I'm so sorry," which I could not have survived. She said, "Okay, what do you need, and who do we call?" And I loved her so much in that moment that I nearly cried again over the scratched container. That is what real support sounds like, I have decided. Not a soft face, but a question about logistics. For the next 2 weeks, Denise covered my afternoon calls whenever I had to step into the stairwell to talk to the bank, to Ruth, to the fraud line. She never asked how I was holding up. She just kept the space around me clear so I could hold up on my own, which was the only way I knew how. I lost the house. I need to say that plainly because I do not want you to think the trail undid the damage. It did not. Without the deposit, escrow could not close. Ruth called me herself to tell me, and her brisk voice had gone soft. And she said, "Claire, I've done this job a long time, and I've almost never seen the referee lose. But I can't referee a game where one player emptied the field." She gave me 2 extra weeks to try to recover the funds. I could not. The sellers, kind as they were, could not wait forever. The morning I got the email saying the property was going back on the market, I sat in my rented kitchen in the west-facing dimness, and I let myself grieve the light I had almost had. I drove past the house once that week, which I know I should not have done. There was already a new sign in the tired yard, a different agency, a brighter red. The blinds I had not yet earned were open, and I could see, from the street, all the way through to the back kitchen, where the east window was, and the morning was in it, that exact patient gold, falling across a floor that would belong to someone else. I did not stop the car. I just slowed, the way you slow past an accident, and then I drove on. And at the next red light, I gripped the taped side mirror and told myself, out loud in the empty car, "You built it once. Hands that build it once can build it twice." I did not fully believe me, but I said it. And saying a thing out loud is how you start to make it true. And by the time the light turned green, I had stopped crying and started counting again. For about a week, I told no one. I went to work, I was gentle on the phones. I let my mother send me 3 separate texts about the flower arrangements for the wedding, and I answered them all like a person who was not carrying a cardboard folder home every night and reading it the way other people read scripture. I think some part of me was waiting, not to gather more proof. I had all the proof there was, but to find the right room. Because I had learned another thing in 7 years of hard saving. The truth is not just what you know. The truth is what you can make other people unable to unknow. And for that, you need the right room and the right moment and enough witnesses that the story can never soften back into a misunderstanding. The room, it turned out, chose itself. My mother announced a family dinner to celebrate the newlyweds, Danielle and Marcus. Had married quietly 2 weeks before the big honeymoon, a small legal ceremony, with the grand wedding still to come. This dinner was the warm-up, the family gathering, everyone at my mother's long table with the good plates out. Danielle would be there, Marcus would be there, my mother, my uncle, my aunt, the whole audience. And I understood, reading the invitation, that this was the room. I did not plan a speech. I did not rehearse a takedown. I simply put the escrow statement and the bank history back into the cardboard folder, and I put the folder in my bag. And I went to dinner like a woman with nothing to hide, which, for the first time in weeks, was exactly true. The dinner began the way our dinners always do, with my sister at the center of the light. She talked about the honeymoon that had not happened yet, the villa, the plunge, pool, the little seaplane that would carry them from the airport across the water. My mother glowed. Marcus laughed his nervous laugh and looked at his plate, and I watched him do it, and I finally understood what I was seeing. He knew. Maybe not all of it. Maybe not the size of it. But a numbers man cannot look at a plunge pool his salary did not buy and feel nothing. He knew the money had come from somewhere it should not have, and he had decided, the way weak, kind people decide, not to ask the question whose answer would ruin the wedding. And then my uncle, refilling his wine, turned to me with the easy cruelty of a man who thinks he is being nice and said, "So, Claire, any luck on the house hunt? Still throwing your money away on rent?" The table's attention swung to me, gentle and pitying. My mother said, "Claire's being sensible." And Danielle, my sister, my forever younger sister, smiled at me across the good plates and said, "Don't worry, Claire. Your time will come. You just have to be brave enough to actually spend the money." And the table laughed. And it was in the ringing silence right after that laugh, the cruelest, best-timed laugh of my life, that my phone, face up on the table, lit up with a call from Ruth Alvarez. I almost did not answer it. Then I saw the name, and something in me went very calm, and I said, "Excuse me? I have to take this." And I stepped just far enough from the table to be seen but not heard. It was Ruth. She was calling after hours, apologetic, to tell me that the sellers had officially accepted another offer, that the file was closed, and that she was so sorry, and that if I ever put together a deposit again, she would personally reopen the door for me. I stood there, a few feet from my celebrating family, listening to a kind woman tell me the last soft version of the thing my sister had done. And I looked back at the table, at Danielle laughing, and I made my decision. "Ruth," I said, quietly, "would you be willing to tell my family, right now, on speaker, exactly what happened to my house deposit?" There was a pause. Ruth Alvarez had guided 1,000 buyers through fear, but I do not think she had ever been asked that. And then, because she was a woman whose entire job was documentation, whose whole faith was that the truth is what protects people, she said. If they're your family and you want them to hear it, I'll tell them exactly what the file says. I walked back to the table. The laughter had not even fully died. My mother said, "Everything all right, dear?" I set the phone in the center of the good plates next to the bread, and I pressed the speaker button. And I said, "Everyone, this is Ruth. She's the escrow officer for the house I was buying. She has something to tell you about my deposit." The table went quiet, the way a room goes quiet when a stranger's voice comes out of a phone. And Ruth, calm and clear, said, "Good evening. I'm the escrow officer who was holding Claire's home purchase. I'm calling because her deposit never reached our account." The transfer was returned for insufficient funds on the 15th, which means the property could not close. I've been in this work for 22 years, and I want to be careful with my words. Claire did everything right. Everything. The money simply was not there when she went to send it. And then Ruth said the sentence that changed the temperature of the entire room. The account it should have come from had a second name on it, and the funds had been withdrawn over several weeks by that second account holder. I have never heard my mother make the sound she made then. It was not a word. It was the sound of a story she had chosen to believe, finally refusing to be believed. Danielle's face had gone the color of the tablecloth. Marcus had put down his fork. My uncle looked from me to my sister and back, the smug kindness draining out of his face. And into that silence, I reached into my bag and I took out the cardboard folder, and I did not throw it, I did not slam it. I opened it gently, the way Ruth had taught me everything is done in escrow, carefully, on the record, and I laid the pages on the table where the laughter had just been. The escrow statement, the returned transfer notice, and the bank history, the long, neat column of withdrawals, with 2 of the merchant names circled in my own hand. "You don't have to take my word for anything," I said, and my voice did not shake, which even now amazes me. It's all here. This is the escrow statement showing the deposit that never arrived. This is the bank record showing where the money actually went. I put one finger on the 2 circled lines. This one is a travel agency. This one is the resort booking company. Danielle, the villa with the plunge pool, the one you were describing 5 minutes ago, I paid for it. For 7 years I paid for it, 1 lunch at a time. And 3 weeks ago, you spent the last of it. And then you sat at this table and told me I just needed to be brave enough to spend my own money. Nobody moved. Danielle opened her mouth, and I watched her reach for the tool that had always saved her. The sweet apology, the tremble, the quick tears that turned every one of her wrongs into something the rest of us had to comfort her about. She said, "Claire, it wasn't, I was going to, it's not what it looks like." And ordinarily, that would have worked. Ordinarily, my mother would have already been on her feet, defending her, telling me to lower my voice, telling me family is family. But this time, the proof was on the table, in a stranger's steady voice, still faintly audible from the phone, in black ink and a bank stamp. And there was no soft version left for anyone to hide inside. The tears came, right on schedule. This time, for the first time in our whole lives, nobody moved to catch them. It was Marcus who broke. He looked at the circled lines, and then he looked at his new wife. And he said, in a voice I had never heard him use, "You told me it was an inheritance." You said your grandmother left it to you. And Danielle's silence answered him, and I watched the last kind. Weak man at the table, understand that his marriage had been paid for with his sister-in-law's 7 years. He stood up. He did not shout. He simply said, "I need some air," and he walked out of my mother's dining room. And the front door closed behind him with a sound that seemed to travel through all of us. Ruth's voice came again from the phone in the center of the plates, gentle, still on the record. "I'm going to let you all talk," she said. "Claire, I'll email you everything we discussed, so there's a copy. You did nothing wrong here. I want that said in front of your family before I hang up." And she hung up, and the silence she left behind was total. The good plates gleaming under the light, the bread going cold in its basket. My aunt, who an hour earlier had toasted the honeymoon, quietly moved her wine glass away from her, as though she did not want to be caught holding a celebration. Nobody had touched the main course. The candle my mother always lit for special dinners burned down between us, and for once, no one performed anything at all. It was, I realized, the most honest our family had ever been at that table. And it had taken a bank's stamp and a stranger's voice to get us there. My mother was crying now too, but they were different tears. The tears of someone realizing which child she had spent a lifetime protecting, and from whom. She said, "Danielle, tell me this isn't true." And Danielle, cornered at last, with no one reaching to save her, said the thing that told me everything about how she had lived. She said, "It was just sitting there, Claire. You weren't even using it. You would have just kept it in the bank forever." At least I did something real with it. As if my patience were a waste. As if a plunge pool were more real than a kitchen window. As if 7 years of a careful life were only a cushion waiting for a braver person to sit on. I did not scream. This is the part I am most grateful for, looking back. I had every right to burn the room down, and I did not. And not because I am a saint, I am not, but because I had learned that the loud, screaming revenge is the one that lets the guilty person become the victim. So instead, I gathered my pages slowly back into the folder, and I said, "I'm not going to yell at you, Danielle. I'm just going to tell you what happens now, and it's very simple because it's all written down." And I told them. The withdrawals were documented. The theft was, legally, exactly that, a theft, from an account where I could prove which deposits were mine. I was not going to ruin her, but I was going to be repaid, on a schedule, in writing, with the same patience she had spent. Or I was going to let the paper trail do what paper trails are built to do. The restitution was not dramatic. That is what I want you to know, because I think we are taught that justice should be loud, and it almost never is when it is real. There was no courtroom scene, no handcuffs, no viral moment. There was a signed agreement, drawn up plainly, that Danielle would repay the deposit in monthly installments, the honeymoon shortened, the grand wedding scaled down, the plunge pool refunded where it could be refunded and worked off where it could not. Marcus, it turned out, insisted on it more fiercely than I did. A numbers man who has been lied to becomes very interested in numbers being right. Every month now, a payment arrives in a new account, one with only my name on it, which I opened the very next morning and named. In the app, Kitchen Window 2. My mother and I are careful with each other now, in a way we never were before. She came to me a week after the dinner, and she did not defend Danielle, and she did not tell me family is family. She said, I always thought your carefulness was fear. I'm sorry. I think it was love, and I called it the wrong name your whole life. That was worth something. Not the house. Nothing brings back that particular east-facing light, but something. She had spent 34 years watching me count and calling it small, and Danielle spent and calling it living. And it took a stranger's voice on a speakerphone to teach her which daughter had actually been building something. Danielle and I do not talk much. The payments come, the messages that come with them have slowly changed over the months, from cold to defensive to, most recently, something quieter that might one day become an apology if she lets it. I do not know yet whether I will have a sister again on the other side of this. I have decided not to force it and not to foreclose it. What I know is that I no longer host the lemonade. I no longer make myself small so that her largeness has room. When she needs comforting for a wound she made herself, I let the wound teach her, the way mine taught me. That is not cruelty. That is just finally letting the referee follow the rules. I found another house 8 months later. Smaller than the first, if you can believe it, and even more tired, the fence actually falling, the paint an unfortunate green. But I stood in the back kitchen on the morning I toured it, and the light came in from the east, across the floor. Exactly the way it had in the house I lost, as if the morning had simply been waiting for me to save again. It took me another year to rebuild the deposit, this time in an account. No one else could touch, and when I wired it into Escrow, Ruth Alvarez herself handled the file. She emailed me the morning the funds cleared. All it said was, "The deposit arrived. Welcome home, Claire." The referee followed the rules. I read it in the break room, with the house box open in front of me, and this time, I let Denise see me cry. I keep the cardboard folder still, not out of bitterness. I promise you it is not that. I keep it because it is the most honest thing I own. Inside, it is the proof that I was not small, that my patience was not a waste, that the careful life I built one lunch at a time was real enough to leave a trail so clear that no laughter at any table could ever unknow it again. I keep it the way some people keep a scar, not to relive the wound, but to remember the exact shape of what tried to take me, and the fact that it did not. So this is what I want to say to you, whoever you are listening. To this, in whatever room the night has found you in, people will tell you that your carefulness is fear, that your patience is a waste, that the brave ones are the ones who spend and never count. Do not believe them. The world is full of people who will call your quiet building just sitting. There, right up until the moment they try to sit on it. Keep your records. Not because everyone is a thief. Most people are not. But because the truth is not only what you know. The truth is what you can lay gently on the table in black ink when the laughter stops. Save your money in an account with only your name on it. And save your softness for the people who would never make you prove you were wronged. The house is mine now. The window faces east. Some mornings, I stand at the sink before anyone in the world is awake. And the light comes across the floor and finds me first. The way I always wanted. The way I saved 7 years, and then another 2 to be found. My sister spent my deposit on a honeymoon. The escrow officer called during dinner. And in the end, the paper I kept so carefully did not just get my money back. It got me my own good name, spoken out loud at a table where I had only ever been laughed at, in a stranger's steady voice. On the record, where it could never be softened again. Thank you for listening. Wherever you are tonight, I hope your light faces east. I keep one more picture from that night, and then I will let the dinner go. As I gathered my folder to leave, my sister followed me to the door. And for a moment, I thought she might finally say the true thing. Instead, she said low, so the others would not hear, "You've embarrassed me in front of my whole family." And I looked at her. This person I had loved my entire life, and I understood that she still. I thought the crime in the room was the fact that I had spoken, not the fact that she had stolen. "Danielle," I said, gently, because I was done being loud forever. "I didn't embarrass you. I just stopped covering for you. There's a difference. And one day, I hope you'll be able to feel it." Then I walked out into the cool night air, where Marcus was standing on the curb, looking at the stars like a man reading a statement, and I touched his shoulder once, and I drove home to start saving again.